Economics. Joining me now is Tennessee Republican Representative Mr. Phil Rowe. Mr. Rowe, you heard that little discussion with Crystal. What about it? Is the right way to do this spend more to create more government jobs?
It's never worked, Eric. We've never seen that work in the history of the country. We tried it in the 30s during the Roosevelt administration. It didn't work to create jobs. And if you can't say this didn't work, when you look, if this particular recession, and I looked at all the recessions since World War II, there've been 8, 4 deep ones. Each time we've come out of a recession, we've come out with 4.7% more jobs. This particular recession, where we tried massive stimulus, we've got 5% less jobs and 10 million people less working if this recession had behaved like any other recession that we've had. So I think you have to decrease the cost of capital. And we've heard in the segment before about people are worried now. Every place I go, I get in front of people.
What are they worried about, sir?
Oh, they're worried about their jobs. They're worried about are they going to keep their job? Can they find a job? I ask one question. Do you think this recession's over? Not a person yet, and this is Democrat and Republicans, have held their hand up. And why they don't feel like it's over is because they can't find the job, or they're afraid they're going to lose the one they've got. In businesses, I've been in private business my entire life. I wouldn't hire anybody right now because of the uncertainty with the Affordable Care Act. We don't know what that's going to cost us. The cost of capital, let me give you an example. If you're out here, and this is, let's say, a business project, and it's worth $1 million, and you go to your bank, and I've had community bankers tell me this over and over and over again. You come in, you get it appraised, it's $1 million project, everybody's happy with it, they lend you the money. Then the federal, with Dodd-Frank, the people come into your bank, your local community bank, said, no, that's not $1 million project, that's a $500,000 project. And guess what? Now the banker's out of compliance, they don't meet their capital requirements, and they're not only going to close this project down, they're looking at the bank to close it down. So people are afraid to lend money. They're afraid to hire right now, and you're not going to get out of this recession until businesses open up and start hiring.
And what about the EPA? What about energy prices? I mean, we're looking at a situation where gas is around $3.65 or 66 cents a gallon. That's double, exactly, in fact, double from January 20th, 2009 when Mr. Obama was sworn in.
Eric, I'm in my district not long ago, and a guy came up and he said, Doc, he said, it's a terrible day when a guy can't buy a gallon of gas and a gallon of milk for $10. Think about that. That's what people are doing now. Inexpensive energy is what made this economy grow in this country. And we have no energy policy that I can tell except pump 30 million barrels of oil out of a strategic oil reserve. We should be having a coherent policy, developing our own energy reserves, and getting off the dependence of this foreign oil. If we keep our prices down on energy, that'll also help create jobs.
And regulation.
And, oh, my goodness, the regulatory burden, you and I have talked about this before. To plant a tomato, I went out to one of my local farmers, and he's a commercial tomato farmer. There's an EPA booklet this thick that he has to go through. He has to fit people for gas masks and have berms around his farm. Takes it out of production. If he goes to another field, he has to do the same thing over. He's got to measure the soil moisture content, on and on and on. We pay for that, and guess what? His competitor in Mexico or Chile or wherever these fruits and vegetables, they don't have that. So he's at an unfair advantage to compete in this market. Unbelievable regulatory.
And certainly can't hire until he knows what the regulatory environment going forward looks like, too.
Absolutely.
All right, we're going to have to leave it there with you. Hang on for a second. You'll be back with us. But just a minute. At this point in past recessions, the economy had recovered all or nearly all of the jobs it had shed or lost. But with this, President Obama, it's just not happening. We're not growing, and we won't be growing anytime soon. That's from the Heritage Foundation. And joining me now is Brian Darling, the Foundation's Senior Fellow for Government Studies. Thanks for joining us, Mr. Darling. Again, we've talked about energy prices. We've talked about Obamacare. We've talked about stimulus. Why is this economy having such a hard time creating jobs and growing?
Well, it's because of the hostile policies of the Obama administration. I think 9.2% unemployment is evidence that the spawn of Keynesian economics, Obamanomics, is an abysmal failure. It's not working. All the money they dumped into the economy through the stimulus plan, it's just not working. It's not creating any jobs. And to argue that we need more government jobs is just laughable. We've already done that. We've tried that. It's failed. It doesn't work. So what the Heritage Foundation has done is we've looked at how do we get to the natural rate of unemployment from 9.2% down to 5.2%. it would take massive growth of the economy. And to get there, you need to repeal Obamacare, all the taxes and all the mandates on businesses. That part needs to go. You need to look at these EPA regulations, carbon dioxide regulations, and make sure they don't
Brian,
go
hold
forward.
on one second. Let me start with your first issue. We need to massively grow the economy. What kind of numbers are you looking at? Because right now we're under 2%, 1.8%, if I'm not mistaken. What number would you look, or does the Heritage Foundation think we need to be at to be fully employed down the road?
Well, look at the growth rates in 2003 to 2007. Those growth rates, you know, if you could get to 4 to 5% growth rates, we're not going to get to that point until 2018. We're not going to get to 5.2% unemployment. And you look at the numbers. I mean, you know the numbers, 9.2%. It doesn't tell you how bad the economy really is. We only created 18,000 jobs in the last month. And if you look behind the numbers, it was a loss of a couple thousand government jobs and a gain of tens of thousands of other jobs in the private sector. But the bottom line is, in the last 5 weeks, we've added 22% to those numbers. So the numbers under the numbers, the underemployment numbers, the people that are dropping out of the workforce, they're staggering. So this administration should be really looking in the mirror, not talking about increasing taxes as part of a debt limit. They need a pro-growth philosophy of lowering taxes, maybe lower the corporate tax rate if you want to eliminate some of these tax loopholes that they talk about, tax earmarks. But you need to look forward and make sure you take that burden off the private sector, so it can grow and we can get back down to 5.2% unemployment.
I think that's what a lot on the left just can't grasp, or chooses not to grasp or can't grasp, that if you do in fact lower taxes, they think, well, that means tax revenue will go down. Not necessarily. If you lower taxes and business start to roll again, they start to loan again, they start to create things again, make things again, sell things again, that makes the tax revenue receipts increase, expand exponentially, right?
Exactly right. The reason why tax revenues are so low for the federal government is because the economy is not growing. The economy is doing really poorly, so the federal government's just not taking in the amount they do during good times. You don't raise taxes at a time when we have high unemployment rates, at a time where the economy is not growing. That's going to be a job killer. It's going to make it even worse, and the federal government may even take in less money if they increase taxes.
All right, absolutely. That's a great point. Thank you very much to Brian Darling from Heritage Foundation. All right, let's bring it out to tonight's all-star panel. On the left, Crystal Ball is back with us. And on the right, Representative Phil Rose back also. And also, Mr. Bo Dietl, founder of Bo Dietl & Associates. Bo, you're sitting over there very quietly, very nicely listening to all this. What do you think?
You know what were we talking about? 19,000 jobs this month?
18,000.
You know, we don't have to go too far back to 1993 to 1995. 350,000 new jobs we were having at that time. You know what? They're sitting in Washington. Obama's sitting in Washington. He knows he has all the numbers with the Democrats as far as getting reelected. But how long do we have to wait until Washington realizes this is serious? People who are Democrats out there can't make this an issue about a Democrat or a Republican. It has to be an issue. He's there 4 years. What has he done? And all we're doing is going into the toilet bowl, and he's got to take charge.
What has he done? The numbers are horrible. I mean, forget the unemployment number. Let's talk about price of food and gas is going up. Home prices off the deep end. Foreclosures expanding. What's going right?
And you know what? I completely agree that we haven't focused enough on unemployment, because all that we have talked about since the midterm elections is the deficit. And not only should you not be, I agree, you shouldn't be raising taxes during a recession. You also should be not making dramatic spending cuts.
Crystal, why
you should not be making dramatic spending cuts in a recession. By the way, our problem is not our current year spending. Our problem is our trajectory. Dramatic, austere, current year budget cuts do virtually nothing to change that trajectory.
Crystal, I went back and looked at this. I looked at year-over-year spending, full government outlays, FYONET, if I'm not mistaken, is the right term for that. They are dramatically increasing over President Obama. $3.6 trillion over the last 2 years. You look back just a handful of years, under $1 trillion. Under $1 trillion.
And I'm not saying that spending is lower under the president. The president spent money to try to bring the economy back to life, and it worked to a certain extent. By the way, going back to the point, you're talking about tax decreases. We've tried tax decreases too. Again,
and they worked. Ronald Reagan showed you how those could work. Hold on.
Stimulus.
Congressman?
I would just simply look, when we cut capital gains taxes back in 2003 to 2007, we had the largest increase of revenue to the federal government in its history. The problem with it is we spend too much money, and every family in the world knows if they live on $50,000 a year and they only make $29,000, they can't continue to borrow $21,000 a year on their credit card. Sooner or later, you go over a cliff.
And what did we get from the Bush tax cuts? From the Bush tax cuts, we got the worst job market, the most anemic job growth in decades.
You want to know something? These numbers, Crystal, really honestly, these are people that are looking for work. These numbers are extremely much higher. If they ever have a tracking that, we would get knocked over our seats. Also, these Afghanistan, Iraqi guys coming back, it's up near almost 14% unemployed.
Look, I'm with you.
Follow me, Crystal.
I agree. It should be our number one priority.
Why can't we take
it should be.
You want $1 trillion?
You want $1 trillion overnight? Talking about deficit
you want
reduction,
$1 trillion?
Wait.
You want
rather than focusing on the immediate crisis that you are absolutely positively right is unemployment. And both parties misread the mandate in November. The mandate was to get people back to work, and they haven't done anything. What have Republicans in Congress done since they've been in power?
You want $1 trillion tomorrow?
With all due respect to Congress.
You don't want to know something? You want $1 trillion tomorrow? Let's repatriate these corporations. There's $1 trillion there. Let them come back. Let them pay taxes. Congressman, what do you think about that?
I like that idea about Congressman.
I kind of like that too. And you know, we're talking about deficits, and the president did some verbiage last week, as all politicians do. Great article in the Washington Post last Friday by Krauthammer, and he says, you know, we can do away with the write-offs on corporate jets. You'll have to go back 5,000 years to make up the deficit of 1 year.
Right.
Or if you take all the big oil companies away from them, it's just going to make the oil prices go. But let's say you do that, and you do the corporate jet thing. Guess what happens? You don't take care of the deficit in February of this year for 50 years.
Absolutely. We're talking $3 billion. We have a $1.5 trillion shortfall. Look, we're taking in $2.5 trillion in revenues and in royalties and fees. That's plenty. That's way more than we've ever taken in before. The problem is that spending side.
Charles Krauthammer had another column in which he said that our tax revenue, our revenue as a percentage of GDP has been about 15%, which is at its lowest ever for 60 years, and that we could afford to raise it a few percentage points.
I don't remember
that.
I can't remember that article. We're going to have to leave it there. Coming up, Fast and Furious scandal is growing.